However, it will be a cooler day with 12 or 13 in the south, whilst we keep the warmth across northwest Scotland, 16 to 18 Celsius here, or even 19 in some of the warmer spots. But for the northeast of Scotland, some mistiness around the coast. That will persist on and off through the day, and it will return more widely into Friday night. Meanwhile, outbreaks of rain start to affect northern England, southern Scotland and Northern Ireland by the start of the weekend. A few showers further south, but also some mist and fog for southern counties of England and South Wales as we begin Saturday. That soon disappears. There'll be some sunshine for a time, but perhaps some more persistent rain pushes into the southwest of England by Saturday afternoon. And we've got this persistent band of rain for Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, as well as northern England, along with a few heavy showers across central parts. So the weather turns more unsettled over the next few days with rain or showers, and it will also feel cooler.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Thursday night, and this is Farage at Large, live from Aberdeen. Please welcome your host, Nigel Farage.
Thank you, James. Very good. Excellent. Now, tonight's show, we're going to be talking all things Scotland.
the downward spiral of the S&P. Does that mean the Alba Party have a big chance? Charlie Abel from Alba joins us this evening live here on GB News. Aberdeen, the home of the oil and gas industry, but can they survive? Net zero policies, can they survive? 75% taxes on their profits. GB News' Liam Halligan joins me to discuss that. And joining me for Talking Pints, well, you all know him from Coast and a whole host of other TV programmes. Now a GB News presenter. Yes, Neil Oliver is my guest for Talking Pints. But before all of that, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you, and good evening to you. The top story tonight: the Prime Minister won't be deciding upon the fate of his deputy, Dominic Raab, tonight, GB News understands. Rishi Sunak says he maintains full confidence in Mr Raab and is considering the findings of an independent inquiry into alleged bullying. The Deputy Prime Minister himself requested the report as the first allegation was made in November last year. 8 complaints were made by staff about Mr Raab's behaviour during his roles as Foreign Secretary, Brexit Secretary and as Justice Secretary. Shadow Attorney General Emily Thornberry says a decision should be made quickly.
I think if he's got this report, he should just read it, and if the man's a bully, then Dominic Raab should go. It's really quite simple. There are many more pressing issues than this. Whilst the Conservative Party continue to be in chaos, the public have completely different priorities. Actually, what we should be doing is we should be having politicians who are focused on the cost of living crisis, on why it is that wages are stagnating, why we're having to wait for months, if not years, for hospital treatment. This shouldn't be what politics is about. Politics should be about making people's lives better.
Emily Thornberry. Now, the Academy of Medical Royal Colleges is urging junior doctors and the government to find a solution to their deadlock over pay for the sake of patients and the wider NHS. Nearly 200,000 hospital appointments had to be rescheduled following the junior doctor strike last week. The Academy had helped to secure a deal between the two sides following strike action back in 2016. And the good news this evening that the senior detective in Northern Ireland who was targeted by gunmen has been discharged from hospital. Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell was shot several times whilst coaching a youth football team at a sports centre in Omagh last February. He'll continue his recovery, we're told, at home. Police have arrested 6 people in connection with the shooting, but no one has been charged. Drivers across the UK are being asked not to pick up their mobile phones during the government's emergency alert test scheduled for this weekend. The AA is advising motorists to switch off their mobile phones during the test. Laws banning the use of handheld phones in cars will still apply. The alarm is due to sound for 10 seconds from 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Sunday. And just lastly, in the United States, the most powerful rocket ever built on Earth has launched from southern Texas. Elon Musk's SpaceX sent the new rocket called Starship into space. The launch was initially successful, but then the booster component didn't separate as planned and exploded into millions of fragments moments later. The SpaceX team describing the moment as a rapid, unscheduled disassembly. British astronaut Tim Peake congratulated the SpaceX team, however, on Twitter this afternoon, encouraging them to test, learn and try again. That's all from me. I'm back in an hour. Now back to Aberdeen, where Nigel Farage has Farage at Large.
Good evening. Well, we're live here in Aberdeen tonight with a very enthusiastic crowd, and we're going to discuss all things Scotland. But to begin, a story that some say isn't relevant to Scotland. No, you'll often hear people say immigration is only an issue in England, and yet, when you look at the social attitudes survey, you find actually people in Scotland are as worried about illegal immigration as people in England are, even if Dover is a long way away. But with 90,000 people now having crossed the English Channel in dinghies, overnight we get the news that Rishi is about to get tough. Yes, the illegal immigration bill is going to be changed to say that the Home Secretary can ignore a judgment that comes late at night from the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. We'll also hear that British judges won't be able to stop deportations unless there are really threatening circumstances. So on the face of it, maybe we've got a bit of a solution to the cross-channel problem that is costing the country so dear. Well, bear this in mind. It'll all be dealt with case by case, judged by people who I don't think have the same view as the majority of the population. But worst of all, the government were in court yesterday against Braintree District Council. And this is over Wethersfield. It's the old military base in northern Essex that they want to use for people that are across the Channel, young men. The government, in its argumentation against Braintree District Council, said unless they had sites like that, they might not be able to provide suitable accommodation in line with Article 3 and Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights. So on the same day, the government tell us they're going to get tough on ECHR, they're actually using ECHR rules under emergency powers to say that these sites must be filled. My advice is don't believe a single word that they say. But their problems are almost as nothing compared to those of the Scottish National Party. Now, to be fair, it's been a good day for Hamza Yousaf. It really has been a good day. Not a single senior official has been arrested all day. But they are in something of a political death spiral. And when a vacuum opens up in politics, it's an opportunity for others, and clearly Labour, very keen to get many seats back in Scotland, the Conservatives fancying their chances. But Alba, the party that was founded by Alex Salmond, clearly they must think they're in with a shout. I'm here with Charlie Abel, a founding member of the Alba Party, local man. The SNP, there's worse to come, I think, isn't there?
Well, it's not for me to say things about the SNP because I'm in the Alba Party. I left the SNP.
Yeah, but they are the governing party of Scotland.
They're the governing party of Scotland, yes, and they're in problems. There's no hiding from that. But that makes me sad, and I'm not here to celebrate the demise of the SNP because the demise of the SNP does not mean the demise of the case for Scottish independence. Scottish independence is much bigger than the SNP.
You
it's much
say
bigger
that.
Than one party.
You say that, Charlie,
it
but
won't go away.
But since 2014, independence, or separation, whichever word you prefer, has become synonymous with the SNP. So surely if the SNP are going towards the floor, surely the whole campaign is too.
That's part of the problem I've had with the SNP, and part of the reason Alba exists is because, and other independence parties, not just Alba, the SNP made it a one-trick pony and they kind of had a monopoly on independence. And we can't have any single party having a monopoly on self-determination for the Scottish people. It has to be a bigger thing. We can't hook our fortunes of a political party to our self-determination because the things that are happening in Scotland with child poverty at 25%, our resources being stolen from us left, right and centre, piped down
Stolen?
south. Yes, they're stolen.
Stolen?
Yes.
Goodness
These resources
me.
belong to the
Goodness
Scottish
me.
people. And they're being taken away.
Yeah, well, I think
we don't get anything for that oil.
No, I know, but it's very interesting, this, because the oil argument, Alex Salmond, the founder of your party, a leader of your party, Alex Salmond, you know, for decades, argued that oil was the way that Scotland could be self-sufficient economically.
It's a bonus.
Yet the SNP's policy is, I think the whole of Aberdeen's going to be a giant wind farm, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, well, there's no problem having the wind farms. They are good, they're a great thing. They're a resource that we should harness, but there are other policies, like to shut down the North Sea, is not something all the SNP agree with, but it seems to be more that the green tail is wagging the SNP dog.
Now, you believe passionately in Scotland being an independent country.
Absolutely.
I understand that. I respect that.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't believe it's the right thing for Scotland, but it's up to you and the people of Scotland to decide, and that's absolutely fine.
It's democracy.
But no, absolutely. Hey, I agree with you. There was a referendum in 2014, a once-in-a-lifetime referendum in 2014. And then...
What happened?
Hang on.
What happened?
Hang on a second.
To remain in the EU. What happened to that?
Hang on a second. There was another once-in-a-lifetime referendum in 2016, and it seems that Alba and the SNP don't respect either result.
Yeah, well, remember, the Scottish people instructed a mandate in 2016 to the SNP government that if there was a material change of circumstances, such as being taken out of the EU against your will, which happened, that we would have another referendum.
No. You'd already voted You'd already decided that in the EU referendum we would decide as a full United Kingdom. You can't have it both ways, can you?
Yes, no.
Well, yes or no?
Do you believe in self-determination of a people under the United Nations Charter? Because either you do or you don't.
Of course I do, but I don't. Of course. Look, hey, I've been an independence campaigner for 30 years, all right?
If it's good enough for you, it's good enough for me.
I understand the emotions behind it. Of course I do. Of course I get it. But you can't have a referendum every Thursday. That's really the point I'm making.
Yeah, well, people can have referendums when the people want to have referendums. And if the people ask for a referendum and Westminster says no, or the Supreme Court says no, as it did in December, then we have a problem, do we?
Well, listen,
we have an overwhelming mandate.
If there is another
referendums.
referendum in 10 or 15 years' time, then the once-in-a-generation test will have been passed. But listen, I know where you stand on this. You're very clear about it. You believe in it passionately. And, hey, we're GB News. We believe in open, free speech. That's why we're here as a channel. Let's move you on to something else really important, I think. The gender reform legislation. Does ALBA support that legislation?
In its current form, no.
OK.
No, because it interferes with women's rights. And the majority of the Scottish people don't agree with it. And we don't think that the Scottish National Party should be going to war with the Westminster government on the Section 35. But that does not mean for a second that we celebrate Westminster using the Section 35 to stop devolution laws that we've passed. And it's no reason for anybody to interfere with devolution.
But the big question, this gender legislation was opposed in opinion polls by 80% of Scots.
Yeah.
Has Holyrood now become rather detached from the Scottish people?
Well, that's part of a problem. The people that we vote for, and especially in Scotland, they get a big mandate for independence, and it seems to have been sidetracked for other issues. And instead of fighting Westminster, if they really believe in the issues they have, they should get independence done, which they were promised to deliver, and they haven't delivered. They've done pretty much nothing in 8 years. If they deliver their independence and we have an independent Scotland, then let's have a vote in an independent Scotland, and never mind fighting Westminster for self-identification. It's self-determination they should be fighting for, and fighting the Supreme Court ruling in December. They just laid back. Did nothing about that. They did nothing about Brexit either. They tried to stop England getting their Brexit, which is ludicrous. If England voted for Brexit,
how much, Charlie Abel, how much do you dislike the English?
I don't dislike the English. It's nothing to do with the English.
But a lot of the Scottish nationalist movement has been profoundly anti-English, hasn't it?
Not
in a really unpleasant, nasty way.
We have lots of English people in my party, and there's absolutely nothing anti-English. We are for everybody. Everybody that wants to live in Scotland is welcome in our party, and it doesn't matter where they're born. Virtue of where you're born has got nothing to do with your politics.
I've seen myself a bit of anti-Englishness when I've been in Scotland before, but it could be just anti-Nigel Farage. It's possible. It's possible.
It's maybe to do with your political views rather than...
Well, it could be, yes. The fact that I believe in independence is why they don't like me. I don't know. Listen, it's really, really interesting how this is going to play out. I've no idea quite how, where this downward spiral of the SNP ends. One final thought. Clearly, Sturgeon, the others, are all damaged beyond repair and not coming back into frontline politics. I just wonder, Alex Salmond, a giant figure, a very personable human being in many, many ways, but is he too perhaps past his sell-by date?
Absolutely not. He's a young man. He's got plenty to offer the independence movement. And if you want to win a fight, you want your best fighter in the ring, and there's no shadow of a doubt. He's one of the greatest figures in Scottish politics over the last 100 years, and if I'm on a team, I would like to have him in my team.
I don't doubt for a minute he's a great scrapper. I don't doubt for a minute he's been hugely influential. I just wonder whether his credibility has taken a big knock too.
There's no issue with his credibility at all.
Well, I tell you what, thank you very much indeed for coming on, for making the case for Scottish independence and separation, and we're going to watch ALBA with very, very great interest, and thank you for joining us this evening on GB. In a moment, we will look at the oil and gas industry, Aberdeen being the centre of it. Can it survive with Scottish Government and indeed Westminster Government policies? Oil and gas in just a moment. All right.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one.
Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like
Absolutely.
on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, I'm here today with Liam Halligan, GB News' economics and business editor, and we're in Aberdeen, this amazing, bustling place that's produced oil and gas and technology and innovation. And I wonder, the SNP government have turned their backs on the oil and gas industry, believing wind farms are the future. The British government have put taxes up to 75% on the profits from the North Sea. There are 25,000 people, I believe, in the Aberdeen area working in this industry.
Directly, yeah. And many more on top of that.
And many more outside of that, because it's good money that's being earned. Does it have a future?
I think it does. This is the oil and gas capital of Europe. But, you know, years ago, at the turn of the century, Britain was producing almost 3 million barrels of oil a day, largely centred on Aberdeen from the North Sea. And now it's significantly less than 1 million barrels a day, but it is still a really significant industry. It is still vital for our energy security. And yet the government, as you say, has taken taxation in little more than a year on the oil and gas industry from 40%, so more than regular corporation tax, from 65% and then to 75%. That was going to be in place until 2025. Now it's 2028. Imagine raising the money to spend tens of millions, hundreds of millions of pounds on an oil and gas exploration project and a drilling project, and then suddenly, from out of the blue, the state says, you know, you were going to be taxed at 40% on your profits, you're now going to be taxed at 75%. That's completely ruinous. And my concern is that the British state, the government, is just too politically convenient and attractive for politicians based in London to squeeze the oil and gas industry, and it massively impacts jobs, it massively impacts our energy security, and it will actually lead to less tax revenue because a lot of oil and gas projects will just be made completely invalid.
But in meeting our net zero targets, if we don't produce our own and import it from the rest of the world, they'll consider that a victory, won't they?
They will. And the First Minister of Scotland, Hamza Youssef, he was here in Aberdeen very recently, as locals will attest, and he says that Aberdeen can become the net zero capital of the world, whatever that means.
Please explain, interpret.
Look, there are definitely green jobs to be had. There is definitely industry there. I mean, down the coast at Teesside, people here in Aberdeen, huge connections, obviously, between the northeast of England and Aberdeen. They'll know that they're building carbon capture processes, lots of green jobs going there. But can it really replace the oil and gas industry in terms of the impact, the transformational impact on the local economy and indeed the national economy of Scotland? Look, we are, with the Norwegian government, constructing, as a United Kingdom, the largest offshore wind farm in the world at Dogger Bank, smack in the middle of the North Sea. That is not to be sniffed at. Whether or not that's the sum total of our energy policy, I don't know, but it shouldn't be, because, of course, renewables by their very nature are intermittent.
Yeah.
We haven't really worked out how we store that energy effectively. We're going to need hydrocarbons for years, probably decades to come. It seems to me short-sighted in the extreme to just keep turning the screw on them in terms of taxation.
And that Dogger Bank, you know, the biggest wind farm in the world, but all these people in this room will, of course, be paying for that through subsidy.
That's right.
On their electricity bills, without anyone ever having asked them whether it's actually what they want. Liam, let's get down to more day-to-day issues. Let's talk about bread and cheese and eggs, because those inflation figures that came out yesterday, bizarre, isn't it? That the financial experts had the inflation figures come in at 9.8%.
That was the forecast, yeah.
We'd have said, hooray, it's all going to be great, because it comes in at 10.1%. We're now back in a doom loop where it looks like interest rates may have to go up again. Why is food price inflation the worst in 45 years?
This was the really big story yesterday, Nigel. Not only that inflation didn't fall into single digits, it went from 10.4% in February to 10.1% in March. But as you and I have been saying for some weeks now, as inflation in general is coming down, food price inflation is going up. In fact, it's accelerating. Food price inflation went up from 18% in February compared to February 2022 to 19.1%. And not only is food price inflation going up as general inflation is coming down, food price inflation is going up as wholesale food prices across the world are coming down. They've been coming down for 13 months in a row.
You're not suggesting the supermarkets are ripping us off, are you?
I couldn't possibly comment. Look, there are obviously lags in the food supply chain. It takes time to plant food, to cultivate it, to process it, and so on. And maybe when some of that food was planted, fertiliser prices were really high, much higher than they are now. Fuel prices were higher than they are now. So it is complicated, but if I was the Prime Minister or advising the Prime Minister, I'd be getting the supermarket bosses in. I'd make them do, the perp walk into Downing Street.
Quite right.
Not to say that there's any wrongdoing, but they need to justify this completely incongruous trend. Look, I do think Rishi Sunak will meet the pledge for inflation to be halved by the end of the year, not because of anything that he does, but just because it's going to happen.
Well,
but this does mean that interest rates are more likely to go up in May.
No. And, of course, it's those, Liam, thank you very much indeed. And, of course, it's those on the lowest incomes who, of course, suffer disproportionately the most with high food prices. In a moment, Barrage the Farage with my Scottish questioners. Let's see what's going to come up.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
It's time for the quickfire round. Yep. Let's get straight into it. Farage the Farage. Neil is first up. Good evening.
Hello, Nigel. Welcome to Aberdeen.
Thank you.
Do you think Scottish voters should vote tactically at the next election?
Yes.
There you go.
No, sorry. No, I do. I mean, look, you know, our first past the post system can produce very bizarre results in politics. You know, I thought what the leader of the Scottish Tories said was perfectly sensible. And it was, if you think the most important, you may not, but if you think the most important question is for Scotland to stay part of Brexit Britain and work together for our future, if you think that, then in my opinion, you should vote tactically. And if you're, I mean, Aberdeen's classic of that. You've got one constituency here that the Conservatives could win at the next election, and one where they've got not a cat's chance in hell. So I think if that's what motivates you, voting tactically makes sense. I'd much rather have PR, where we vote for parties we actually like and believe in. We've got what we've got. What say you?
Well, I have voted tactically once before, but we ended up getting the SNP, so I wanted to keep Labour out, so...
Yeah, well, OK. Well, if you wanted to keep Labour out and you got the SNP, you won in a sense.
Oh, well.
Neil, thank you very much indeed. Next up is Brian.
Good evening, Nigel.
Good evening.
With the UK gripped in a cost of living crisis and interest rates going up monthly and food inflation spiralling out of control, would you, if the Brexit vote was this year, still recommend us to leave?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Brexit was about becoming a self-governing, independent country, being able to make your own decisions, being able to make good decisions for your own country. Oh, and by the way, bad decisions as well for your own country, but being in control. Look, you know, there's so much. Anything that goes wrong is blamed on Brexit. Literally anything that goes wrong is blamed on Brexit. Take Scotland, take Aberdeen. If we got a proper Brexit, Aberdeen, like Norway on the other side, would have 200 miles of that North Sea as our exclusive economic fishing zone. And I tell you what, there wouldn't just be a thriving industry, fish prices would be lower. Brexit, you know, as I say, everyone's trying to blame everything on it. The fact is, at least we're now in control. What do you think?
Well, I voted leave, so I agree with you.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Cheers, Brian. OK, Bill, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. My question is, Hamza Yousaf seems determined to introduce a minimum income guarantee scheme for all adults in Scotland up to a maximum of £25,000 per annum. And this, of course, to be paid for by further increases in taxation for middle and high earners. Undoubtedly, this will be popular with the work-shy, alcoholics and drug users, of which we have plenty already. I think this is a mixture of desperation and insanity. What do you think, Nigel?
Joking aside, the level of drug deaths in Scotland are simply shocking. Simply shocking. I mean, they've more than doubled in the last 8 years, and they're going up at a very rapid rate. I mean, horrendous. You know, you can keep buying off the electorate. You can keep bribing the electorate. But in the end, someone has to pick up the tab. And under devolution, Scottish finances, they have become frankly disastrous. Even if the SNP won the next election, won a referendum and tried to rejoin the EU would say, no, your finances aren't good enough to be a member and to join the euro. Look, if you try to set a level like this 25,000, yes, of course, the ne'er-do-wells will be thrilled. But what about the aspirants? What about those young people, those on low pay that have got some ambition, that want to get on in the world? What you effectively do is put a glass ceiling on their aspirations, because you disincentivize them to earn more than that target. And that way lies madness. You know, you've got to have, to be successful, you've got to have aspiration. You've got to have ambition. You've got to have people that are successful and then pay taxes, which keeps those that can't look after themselves going. You can't just do it by dishing out subsidy. I'm sure that if the late, great Adam Smith were around today, he'd be horrified by this. I think you feel rather the same way.
Exactly. I think you've just nailed it.
Thank you very much indeed, Bill. Very kind. OK, Linda.
Hi, Nigel. Brent crude is currently at $78 per barrel. The crude price is now comparable to prices in 2018, where diesel prices at the pump were around £1.20 a litre. Prices are clearly higher now, but significantly higher last year, where it was nearly topping £2 a litre. Do you see a time soon where forecourt prices will be brought down significantly to help everyone with the cost of living crisis?
Well, I mean, unleaded prices are well down. Unleaded is now 144, 145. Quite why diesel's 15 points more when actually the wholesale price is the same remains a mystery. However, we may be producing some of our own oil that can be, you know, go through the fractional process and be turned into unleaded and into diesel. But let me tell you this. Most of our refineries have closed. Most of our refineries in Britain have closed. Do you know why? Because the highest electricity bills, the biggest disincentive to manufacture in this, it's why our aluminium smelters have gone, it's why many of our chemical plants have gone. And so actually, about 40% of our diesel comes from Russia. Russia. I mean, the madness of this. I'd love us to have, honestly, if renewable energy worked and wasn't subsidised and was zero carbon, I'd be thrilled. But it's not. And we're years away from having the proper storage capacity. We will, as Liam Halligan said a moment ago, we will be using hydrocarbons for decades to come. I think it'd be much better not just to produce as much of our own oil and gas as we possibly can, but also to process it into unleaded and diesel here. And if we did that, we get a damn sight better prices than we're currently getting.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you very much
Thank
indeed.
you.
Now, one more. Michelle. Hello.
I'm so far north, it means a lot.
We're delighted to be here.
I was just wondering who you'd rather have a pint with, Alex Salmond or Nicola Sturgeon?
Oh, there's no question about that.
And why?
Do you know what? I probably shouldn't say this. Should I? Yeah. Oh, all right, then. I got to tell you, the times that I've done debates with Nicola Sturgeon, been face-to-face with Nicola Sturgeon, walked past Nicola Sturgeon in corridors, I don't think I've met anybody in politics anywhere in the world that I found so personally, deeply arrogant and unpleasant as Nicola Sturgeon. Alex Salmond... I know, I mean it. Alex Salmond, I think the use of the word independence is nonsense when for all of those years he wanted to be part of the European Union. Yeah. You can't be an independent country and be a part of the European Union. Although his current EFTA proposal, I have to say, is, I still wouldn't want to do that, but it's slightly better. But Alex Salmond, you can believe what you want to believe over court cases, over allegations, over all the rest of it. I've always thought Alex Salmond to be, actually, you know what? A larger-than-life, deeply flawed, but very, very human person. No problem having a few pints with Alex Salmond, none whatsoever. Thank you very much indeed. In a moment, I'm going to be joined by a Scot who also is proud of Britain. He, of course, shot to fame with that amazing BBC Two series Coast, which was brilliant. He's now a GB News presenter. He's also got one or two views on what the government did to us during lockdown. In a moment on Talking Pints, I'll be joined by Neil Oliver.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope? It's very much so. And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is great. I'm joined by Neil Oliver for Talking Pints. Neil, it had to be a pint of heavy, didn't it, really, coming north of the border?
It's
Cheers.
Lovely to have you in my homeland.
It's very good to be here with a civilised audience. I did meet difference once before, but that's history. Neil, as a Scot, but you said back in 2014 that you're proud of Britain.
Yeah, yes, I never used to give it a second thought about saying that I was, born in Scotland and British. I've never been, believe it or not, political. I've never been a member of a political party. I've never been part of a political movement.
And so it was never a political statement for me to say that I was both Scottish and British. And that had been intensified for me by the experience of making the kind of television that I made for a lot of years and the books that I wrote.
Yeah.
I had a very intimate experience of the whole of the British Isles, England, Ireland, Scotland and Wales, you know, going round and round and round, which obviously, being on the coast, obviously necessitates being inland as well to get from place to place. And I just genuinely felt that I fell in love with the whole place in a way that I wouldn't have been if life had taken me in a different direction. And so when it came to the run-up to the referendum, and I was asked the straight question what I would rather do, I felt that if Britain was to be broken up into component parts, I felt it would have been like that, you know, the old story about, you know, old soldiers that lose a leg and they're still scratching for them, you know, 50 years later. I felt I would have been missing something profound. You know, I've had great experiences everywhere around the whole of the United Kingdom, Great Britain, the British Isles, whatever you want to call it, and I just wanted to retain that. So it was never political for me. It was just love of country, love of the whole country.
You said it. Some people didn't like you for saying it, but then in referendums, as I know, tensions do tend to rise. Archaeology, Neil. You studied archaeology. You are, you know, a history fanatic, basically. Where did that love of history, that fascination with all the struggles that we've been through for centuries, where does it all come from?
I suppose, really, I grew up in a house where my mum and dad both read. There were books in the house. You know, I considered at the time both of my parents to be well read in a traditional sense. And so I always had access to the stories, and my mum and dad were always able to talk about subjects of interest to me. And then it was no more complicated, essentially, than that history was a subject that I just enjoyed at school. And I had good teachers. I had teachers who inspired me. Yeah. Likewise with English. English and history were the subjects that I particularly enjoyed. And so when it came to university, although I might have studied history, what I was really moved by was getting back to what I regard as the page one of the story of the human species, which it suddenly dawned on me that archaeology would be the way to do that, to get beyond the reach of written history, right back to the beginning. And so I pursued the path of archaeology, and that made all the difference. That eventually took me in all of the directions that I've been in.
And with more of modern history, kind of family members that have been involved in world wars and things like that?
Well, yeah, like many people, I suppose, of my age, my generation, both of my grandfathers were in the First World War and survived. I've long been moved by that, the fact that, you know, my dad's dad was wounded in France, and my mum's dad was wounded in Gallipoli, and it occurred to me early on that, you know, if they had been any more badly wounded, I would not have happened. But that's a story that's true for millions of people. But in my case, it meant that I felt intimately connected to one of the biggest events of world history, the First World War, and I thought, well, if I'm connected to the First World War, then by association I'm connected. And my connections, it felt to me, go all the way back to Scots that saw the Romans, and, you know, to Neolithic farmers.
Yeah, the Romans didn't make it here, did they?
Well, they would have been here, and they would have been familiar to the people here in terms of trade and contact, without a doubt. They were certainly here. Mons Graupius, you know, the great battle with Calgacus, you know, the last of the free, and all of that is, you know, we're there, we're in the.
But they were repelled in the end from Scotland, weren't they?
Well, it's a good question. I suppose it depends how you want to interpret it. You might also say that there were logistical considerations. It was at the end of their supply chain for the Romans. They were with people who had made it plain that they not in their entirety, they didn't want to be part of the Roman project. Very expensive to garrison and supply an army. You've got to weigh it up and see what's to be had. What can we have to justify all the expense of being here?
And lots of independent-minded Scots to deal with.
And lots of people, lots of people who had made it plain that there were other ways to live, and that they wanted to pursue those other ways of living.
You've written so many books. You've done so many programmes on this. Historical programmes, documentaries, trying to bring history alive to people, which is what I think you love to try to do. And yet it's this Coast programme, isn't it, that started off in 2005, whenever it was.
Yeah, a bit earlier, but yeah.
Yeah, that ran on for years. How did you get the gig?
Well, I was... I remember getting the phone call. I was with my wife. We were working on a flat that we were doing up in Glasgow. Things had gone very quiet for me television-wise at that point, and I got a call saying that they were casting for a new television series. Well, actually, believe it or not, in its first iteration, Coast was going to be a live weekend of television. The idea was to get someone big, like a Billy Connolly, or a big well-known face, to be moved around the country very quickly in helicopters and jet planes and boats around the coast and all of the rest of it. And they needed 4 or 5 people to film short films that would become fillers, really, while Billy got on a plane and did whatever he had to do. But in the end, it all changed. Lots of discussions were had, and it became the 12-part series that it originally was. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. I had made a little bit of television, a little bit of archaeological, historical television. Fell in, just was in the right place at the right time. But Coast, I was thinking about it, watching you doing this, watching these live events that you do, that you do so well, and Coast, believe it or not, the great satisfaction and joy of it was meeting people all the time. It looked like, and it was about landscape, and it was about music and sweeping vistas and all of the rest of it. But at heart, it was about going to places and meeting people and finding out about what those places meant to those people. And that can be very intoxicating, when you're with people who have love of place. So up in the north east, or in the west of Ireland, or in Cornwall and in Wales, we were meeting people and telling stories, and it was those human connections, actually, I think, that made Coast the very special project that it was, and that's what really infected me with that real love of place that I came away with, which we talked about at the top of this chat.
I loved it. I thought it was an absolutely brilliant programme, and it kind of catapulted you into a new place. And of course, with your distinctive appearance, everyone knows who you are.
It's my brand.
Well, no, it's a very good brand. Don't worry about it. And it led on to really good things, and 1 or 2 honours. I mean, being asked to be president of the National Trust for Scotland, that's a hell of a thing, isn't it? Well,
that was a double-edged sword, to be quite honest. I was the first commoner, you would say, to hold that post. Previously the Duke of Buccleuch and other titled people had always had 9 presidents, I think, before me, and it was someone's bright idea to bring in someone from the other side of the tracks, so to speak, and it was a great opportunity potentially, and then it was blighted. It was blighted in the end, by various circumstances, which meant I would quite happily have done it for longer. But that association didn't end particularly happily. But the people that I met to do it, who were involved with the trust, were great. Great, hard-working people, very dedicated to the cause. The places that I visited, but I came away from it quite glad to be beyond it.
You kept moving on because you were there on the opening day of GB News. You're presenting a regular show, and you've had some very strong opinions about the error of lockdown, the excess of government.
Absolutely.
How's GB News?
I think GB News is essential. I really do. I thought that when the proposition was made, when I was told about this fledgling, this thing that was going to be hatched as GB News, and right from the get-go, I thought that the media landscape in Britain absolutely needed GB News, and I still think it needs GB News, because we have and are, we do make space for all sorts of voices. It's a very broad church. All sorts of conversations are there to be had, and I. Obviously it's particularly important to me that I get the opportunity to say the things that I think need to be said and that, frankly, I don't think are being said elsewhere. There are other. I expected, when I saw the absolute travesty of and the damage of lockdown unfolding as that began to bite, and one thing after another, and I thought, surely one of the silverbacks from the media community is going to step up and say the things that need to be said, and that just didn't happen, and still hasn't happened. There's been this gross dereliction of duty on the part of the mainstream media. They're still not asking the questions about the vaccines. They're still not asking the questions that need to be asked about all sorts of topics. GB News has facilitated someone like me and other people within that channel to at least ask some of those questions, to make space for voices of vaccine injured, challenge. The government is still turning its back on the people that have been damaged by that whole story. But there's so much else besides net zero that you were talking about tonight. That's disastrous. That's a suicide note for the country. All of those things need to be challenged, and thankfully, as it's turned out, GB News has been prepared to give space to those conversations.
You've certainly got the passion for that challenge and for those arguments and for those debates, and that comes across very, very clearly. Now, 3 o'clock this Sunday, our mobile phones are going to buzz as Big Brother...
Mine won't.
...checks out. I was going to ask you...
Well, I've taken the necessary steps, Nigel.
No, I got to tell you, Neil, mine won't either. The next thing they'll be doing is sending us a text or a message to say the weather's too hot to leave your front door or whatever.
Who do they think they are? We all pay for mobile phones. There are private property. There are things that we use to stay in touch with each other, with loved ones, and all of the rest of it. Who do they think they are, muscling in on our private lives at that minute level that they think that they can make their conversations go off as an alert in our pockets? Who do they think they are? It's a little symbol of the extent that it's government to back off.
Well, I have to say, Neil Oliver, you never disappoint with your love of history, of people, your passion for what you believe in, and it's great to work with you at GB News. Give him a warm round of applause, please.
That's all of you.
Now,
thank you.
Now, James Cooper was playing the bagpipes for us earlier. He's the pipe major of Ballater and District Pipe Band. And James, rather distinguished, you've piped for our beloved late Queen, you've piped for our King, about to be crowned, and you've got a very busy summer coming up.
Busy summer, a lot of drinking and piping. So it depends. So it's my full-time job now, so I do a lot of weddings, funerals, a lot of teaching as well, so it's pretty busy, hectic season coming up.
Well, you're pretty good at it, and you're going to play us out, as we always do. Wherever we go, we try and find local musicians or singers, and in this case, of course, appropriately, a piper. So, James, what are you going to play for us?
I'm going to be playing Cock of the North.
Absolutely. Take it away. Thank you. Fantastic audience. We've had a great trip here to Aberdeen. Some really big live political issues. Boy, hasn't politics changed in Scotland over the course of the last couple of months. And my guess is there's a lot more change to come. Fascinating, interesting, real passion. It's the first time we've taken this show north of the border, but one big promise, we'll be coming back very, very soon. Good night.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. Staying clear in the north during the next 24 hours, but a marked change in the south where cloudier conditions will move in, along with showers or longer spells of rain. We've still got high pressure in charge to the north of the UK, and that's maintaining an easterly breeze throughout the whole of the country. But that high pressure is waning in its influence, and that's going to allow some weather to return to England and Wales. Certainly additional cloud moving in on Thursday evening, some showers at first before perhaps some longer spells of rain into eastern parts of England by the end of the night. With a breeze here as well as the cloud, it's going to stay frost-free, 4 to 6 or 7 Celsius. But for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, clear skies and lighter winds will allow a touch of frost, especially for central and northern Scotland, with temperatures here in rural spots below freezing. A sunny start, though, in the north first thing. Meanwhile, across England and Wales, we've got cloudier conditions and a band of rain moving across central and then towards southwestern parts by the afternoon. That wet weather will be persistent in places, but it will break up more generally into showers, with some sunshine in between. However, it will be a cooler day with 12 or 13 in the south, whilst we keep the warmth across northwest Scotland, 16 to 18 Celsius here, or even 19 in some of the warmer spots. But for the northeast of Scotland, some mistiness around the coast. That will persist on and off through the day, and it will return more widely into Friday night. Meanwhile, outbreaks of rain start to affect northern England, southern Scotland and Northern Ireland by the start of the weekend. A few showers further south, but also some mist and fog for southern counties of England and South Wales as we begin Saturday. That soon disappears. There'll be some sunshine for a time, but perhaps some more persistent rain pushes into the southwest of England by Saturday afternoon. And we've got this persistent band of rain for Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, as well as northern England, along with a few heavy showers across central parts. So the weather turns more unsettled over the next few days with rain or showers, and it will also feel cooler.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dubes & Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.